All right. Firstly, good afternoon, everybody. And I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands of a very diverse geography and pay my respects to elders past and present. RDA Sydney welcomes you and thanks you for taking the time out of your busy day to participate in, I hope, a non-painful, perhaps fun 45 minutes of education and inspiration. What's unique about this webinar is that it features 4 very different perspectives about remote working. It talks about well-being, technology, what researchers are saying, and it provides an insight from a seasoned work from home employee. I'd like to introduce you to our panel moderator and author of the free report that you're actually going to receive via email early next week. This is Mr. Tim Sheedy, and he is the principal advisor from the research firm Ecosystem. Tim will facilitate the discussion today and manage Q&A questions during the webinar. We hope to attempt to answer all your questions during this webinar, but if we are unable to do so, we will respond early next week via an email to those questions. And we'll also provide you with a recording of this webinar and any other resources that our panelists would like to share. So Tim, thank you once again very much for giving you of your time as moderator, and I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Therese, and hi everyone. Again, I'm Tim Sheedy. I'm an analyst with a company called Ecosystem. I'll talk a little bit about who Ecosystem is in a minute, but you know, my background is I spent 12 years at Forrester, nearly 10 years at IDC, been a technology analyst for most of my life, most of my working life anyway. The information I'm going to be presenting today in my sort of quick introduction presentation is actually drawn from a lot of the research I've been doing with organizations over the last probably up to 6, 7, 8 years around how they're doing collaboration well and how they're managing remote workers. All the strategies that I'm going to be talking through that organizations are using today are ones that organizations have used to increase their productivity through remote working. So they've actually gone from an in-office scenario to a remote working scenario, and you know, they actually benchmarked their productivity beforehand and actually saw an increase in that productivity going forward by using some of these tips and tricks. So I hope you can get some use out of them going forward. But before I jump into the presentation, I just wanted to, I guess, set the scene, and I've got a quick poll that I'm going to put on the screen now. Basically asking how hard you're finding it at the moment to work remotely or work from home. Whether it's very easy, somewhat easy, moderately difficult, very difficult, or extremely difficult. If you could answer that, and then I assume the results will come up on the screen. Is that the way, the way this works, clearly? I haven't done a poll in Zoom before, so I apologize about my ignorance here. I'm not sure where that poll went. I apologize. Hopefully we'll be able to get the results of that poll. I didn't see any results, so that is not a great start, but hopefully we'll be able to get the results of that poll.
I can see the results, Tim. Apologies.
Thank you. Thanks, Lily.
We've got 31% said very easy, 43% somewhat easy, 25% moderately difficult, and just 2% very difficult. And no one's finding it extremely difficult.
Oh, that's good news. Oh, that's great. That's so we're all starting from there it is. There are the results there. Cheers. Awesome. So it sounds like we're starting from a pretty good base. So hopefully the things that myself and the panel are talking about today will actually give you the ability to sort of, drive your productivity further. But I'm now going to share my screen, and hopefully you'll start to see the slides on the screen around remote working. So quickly, who Ecosystem is. Effectively, if you think of Forrester, Gartner, IDC, we're trying to be a digital version of them. Take away the inefficiencies out of their model and ultimately with an aim of democratizing data, making it easy for the ecosystem, which is analysts, tech vendors, and technology buyers and people interested in the technology space, to be able to get access to the information they need to make better decisions. Our real differentiator is effectively we have a digital platform which lets you do real-time benchmarking. So if anyone is on this call and you're interested in implementing an AI solution or a cloud solution or security or analytics, IoT, etc., go to that website that you see in the corner, ecosystem360.com. Register there, and as an IT buyer, you'll get free access to the benchmarking. It's real-time benchmarking where you see your scores against those of your peers, etc. So encourage you to go and use the platform. So remote working. I think I was sort of saying this is the new reality. I think for a lot of people out there at the moment, that they are, they're saying that, yeah, yes, it's, it is easy. There are certain things, I'm getting all my commuting time back in the day, etc. But we actually need to do some things differently. And we actually, if we want to go to the next level of productivity, there's, a few things that we need to start focusing on to do more effectively. And this is effectively summarized here on this page. This is my main content I'll be talking about over the next 5 minutes or so. So some of you are still in the office, and look, I will admit that I did write this report when not the majority of people were working at home. And so I sort of started with this idea that remote working starts in the office. So if you are still in the office, even your life has changed. And there are things that you can do to understand the challenges of all of your colleagues or peers or the partners. Like you might be a smaller organization and you're now working with partners who are all working at home with their challenges. So what we've seen some of the best practices around sort of starting in the office is we've seen organizations send individuals out to all corners of the office and sort of say, you know what, you 5 people in that team are not allowed to see each other the whole week, right? Don't spend any time physically together. And at the end of that week, you'll have a really good idea of the pain that those remote working employees are going through. And start thinking about things like, let's say we do have a meeting and there are some physical and some virtual people in the meeting. How does that work? We used to do it around meetings around a square table. If you set a laptop up with a webcam in that table, for each individual who's remote, they're not going to see anyone next to them, right? So we're starting to see people move towards round table setup. So even when you've got virtual and real sitting there, they're sitting next to each other around the table. They can all see each other. They can eyeball each other around that table. But one of the biggest changes that we are seeing businesses have to make is this whole idea of documenting and sharing everything that you do. Well, not everything, but the key things that you're working on. Now, that's because, if you were sitting in an accounts team traditionally, or, you're sitting in a reseller or a council, you turn around to your colleague and you'd say, where are you at with that project, right? And they'd say, oh, about the, in the accounting team, oh, I've just invoiced that today, expecting payment in the next 2 weeks, etc. When you are all working at home, we don't have that access, right? And we don't want to be ringing our colleagues every 10 minutes asking them these questions. So again, organizations that are doing it well are starting to document what they're doing. We're actually in our organization, we're starting to use Teams. We're setting up Teams to try to work out, okay, what are the key things we're working on? What are the things we need to let other people know about? What are the things we need to be working on together that become projects in Teams? And what are the things that are just about me informing others about what's going on? Look, if you do have a help desk, if you do have a contact center, they're probably already running this software. Contact centers are already really good at handing off issues from one agent to the next who might not be sitting next to each other in the same room. So if you do have those resources, go and speak to them. If you have colleagues, peers, other people in the industry who are doing this better than others, just say, what's the software you're using to do this? Because we need to have better visibility of what everyone's doing. I have already had the experience in Ecosystem in my first 10 days where the whole company is remote, where 2 of us found out we were working on the exact same initiative, separately from each other and doing extra work, right? So had we been documenting that and sharing that progress, that wouldn't have happened. Very quickly, use a video conferencing system that works. That's, you know, Zoom is taking off at the moment. I'm not going to particularly comment on any of the security issues or challenges that people are having with different platforms, but simply use one that works. It might not be your corporate one, is perhaps what I'd recommend. Have on every call that you will have people like me. Now, I'm the person on the call that dominates the conversation, that talks over others, and you'll probably see this, hopefully not too much going forward in the Q&A session, as I force myself to shut up. But what we've actually found, the best practice here is at the beginning of the call, say, Tim, Mary, John, whatever. On this call, it's your job to make sure everyone speaks. You're going to go around the room and you're going to ask everyone for their view, because otherwise it will only be the noisy people who make all the decisions for the organization. And the noisy people are not always particularly the right people making the right decisions, right? So have that comms champion on each call. In terms of collaboration, we need to start thinking of collaboration as something that we do, not a tool or platform that we use. And we're probably not doing this at the moment. I know a lot of us at the moment are probably doing oh gosh, we've got Teams or we've got this or we've got that, and how do we use it more effectively? And we're starting with the tool. Start with the business problem with collaboration. Collaboration is ultimately a business problem. We're trying to come together to solve an issue. I'm guessing your organization, no matter how big or small, are already having some versioning issues with documents, right? Something that used to take an hour in the office when you'd all sit around a laptop together and work on a document or sit there around each other, sharing information with each other, to get a PowerPoint or a proposal or a contract finalized. Now it's taking us hours and days or weeks to get done because we're sending documents back and forth. There's 8 different versions of every document, etc. So we have to start thinking about collaboration as something that we do to achieve an end. For me, a particular challenge we're having is some documents we're working on to get information to clients. So we need to be able to deliver that value faster. That's the specific problem we're trying to solve. Now, a collaboration tool will help us solve that problem, but we're focusing on that problem. If you're a big enough organization, and maybe if you're not, if you've got someone with a bit of spare time, I talk about having this collaboration SWAT team. Have someone whose job it is to sit around and listen for business problems that involve collaboration challenges, right? It's taking me too long to get this proposal out. I'm having versioning issues, etc. These are all collaboration problems, right? And then you go in and you solve that business problem. And again, the business problem isn't, that it's taking us forever to send files back and forth. The business problem is that it's taking us too long to get that proposal out, right? So solve that problem probably with a collaboration tool. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's changing the way that humans work together. Oversharing in this environment is important. We don't have the water cooler talks, etc. We don't have the banter in the office. I know in our organization, we've sort of chosen WhatsApp as our banter platform where we send dumb jokes, idiotic things. I was sharing with people across the globe yesterday, actually, the liquor restrictions that have just come in Australia, right? You're probably aware of them, that we are now restricted to only buying 2 cases of beer and a case of wine per day, right? Like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I put that out there going, how's that a restriction? Who's drinking more than that per day? And one of my colleagues in Denmark actually came back with Tim, when you're reaching for that 13th bottle of wine tonight, you might recognize that problem. So, we're trying to encourage this banter. We're starting to do things like, if it's someone's birthday, we're using Uber Eats, etc., to send like cupcakes or little sweets out to everyone with the knowledge that we're actually making savings from electricity and the normal office costs, etc., that we normally have. I know we're all very conscious of budget at the moment, but we're trying to find that little bit of extra budget to have some human interactions, right? In this very digital world. Mobilizing business applications is a bigger thing that we need to work on. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, but you're probably starting to see already that there are some things that are working well in your business, some things that work great on a tablet, a smartphone, and some things you go, I wish I could do that, on a phone. I wish I didn't have to go into that application, log into that, go into that process, click that box, etc. to do it. I want a button on a phone to be able to do that. So you'll start to get that laundry list of those applications you need to mobilize. And finally, if anyone was sort of on the call earlier, but before we started, you might have heard me talking about this, but one of the things that I think is really going on right at the moment is that we're becoming more digital, and we need to think more digitally in the way we deliver value to our clients. So look at the friction in our digital interactions and get rid of that friction. Now, look, I have gone over time, so I'm going to quickly get through this. This is just a Zoom call with our core team here in Ecosystem. You're probably doing these yourself already. This is something one of my colleagues said, why don't you send, can you send us a photo of your work setup, right? Because again, you get an idea of if someone's sitting in a dingy corner, you probably understand why they're a bit moody at the end of the day. Someone, you can see the work at home veterans, bottom right, bottom left, that's bottom right's myself here, versus the people sitting in there at the dining tables, etc., who are just new to this. They're going to have different challenges, right? Very quickly, I put a photo of a coffee out and I said, I've got a new coffee machine. My colleague in Denmark went, I can do better than you. He put a better looking coffee out and showed his machine. And I had a connection with him. I had a human connection with someone who, interestingly, I've worked with him for over 20 years, never physically met the guy, never really known anything about him at all. And he and I are now having human connections over digital platforms. Other people started putting their coffees out and I responded with things like, I don't even know what that stuff on the right is. And then at the end of last week, we all went, let's all have a drink together. Maybe not together, but alone, and share that moment with everyone. So this is us just, the idea that teams that play together stay together. So anyway, that's sort of a longer than I hoped for introduction to the topic. I'm now going to sort of shut up for a sec and hand over to the panelists. We've got a great group of panelists here on the call. Angela Wright, who's from the Export Council of Australia, Sheila, who's an executive coach with EI Executive, and Matt Wynn-Jones, the co-founder and managing director at Counterparts Technology. I'm going to hand over to Angela to start with, if you can just give a quick introduction of yourself.
Hi, thanks Tim, and pleased to be joining the discussion today at a very timely point in time. So how I fit into this is I've had a range of work from home roles and office roles over the past 12 years, and sometimes a combination of both. And at the Export Council of Australia, where I currently work, I've organised a range of programs from my home office. So things like intensive training, bringing high potential female entrepreneurs to Australia from Asia and Pacific to build their export skills. And at the ECA and in other roles that I've had, I've also worked with remote teams to deliver business training around Australia. And I've been fortunate to travel to many places for work as well. And recently, the whole ECA team has started working from home, including head office and state managers. So now we're all in the process of adjusting, learning how to work well with each other. And I look forward to sharing some of my experiences.
Cool, thanks Angela. Sheila, sorry, over to you.
Thanks Tim, I've been called worse. So Tim, hi, and hello to everybody. My name's Sheila. I'm an executive coach. I work with individuals, leaders and their teams to promote high performance, both across public, private sectors and SMEs. And clearly, as you'd imagine at the moment, working very closely with my clients who are facing some of the real challenges we all are around having to upskill and start working virtually.
Cool, thanks Sheila. And Matt.
Hi Tim, thanks very much everyone. It's Matt Wynn-Jones. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Counterparts Technologies. We're a technology solution provider. Our focus is really around workspace efficiency, data center optimization and managing security and risk. We service both government and commercial clients around strategic and consulting, procurement and vendor management, and managed services. So I also sit on the New South Wales Council for the Australian Information Industry Association, which is Australia's peak body representing a large number of small and large companies, providing advocacy work and policy advice to government. So thanks very much for the opportunity. So hopefully I can give a lens from an industry perspective, but also small business and medium business.
Cool, thanks Matt. Yeah, it's three really different and sort of unique perspectives that we're going to get here over the next 15, 20 minutes. So Angela, I'm going to kick off with yourself. So what was it like when you started working from home? How did you manage the transition, and were there any particular challenges that you were facing?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yes, certainly there were a number of challenges. And I'd like to share a few key ones that I had to overcome, keeping in mind that it didn't happen overnight. So firstly, I definitely felt a shift from working in a fully equipped office with printers and stationery and being able to ask colleagues anytime for help, to going to a less than ideal home office space, which at the time was the dining table, and I'd have housemates interrupting me all the time. So there was a process of negotiation and compromise involved. That experience was many years ago, but the principle of making my workspace functional is still very relevant now, no matter where I'm living, and especially when I'm traveling for work. And secondly, without being around a team or having that supervision from a manager, it was really easy not to be disciplined. So I had to create some routines to get into the right frame of mind to work productively, and also find ways to avoid temptations like binge watching a series now that I was spending all this extra time at home. And another challenge was finding that over time, working from a home office can be isolating, especially if it's just yourself at home for so many hours when everyone else is out. So I did find that I had more mental space and probably, better productivity from less distractions, but I also needed to find ways to balance that with social interaction, like phone calls and coffee catch up. And it's important to remember to stay connected when you're a remote worker.
Cool. So what are some, you mentioned the phone calls, coffee catch-ups, etc. What are some of the other things that you did to, in order to work from home successfully? And I guess, is there anything you tried that didn't work, that was a spectacular failure? Hopefully not.
Yeah. But... yeah, in terms of things that haven't worked, sometimes technology, that can always be a spectacular failure. Just making sure that your internet connections well established. I've tried, there were times where I was trying to work out of a cafe, but not really sustainable for myself or probably the cafe owner, with having somebody sitting in there for hours as well. And you get a lot of background noise if you're doing calls. When I've been really busy, I've had a lot of my to-do list. Sometimes I've thought, I'll just cut out my, I'll work at my desk, I'll just eat lunch at my desk, or I won't have that break this afternoon. But I found that was really counterproductive in terms of not coming back refreshed and ready to do the task. But some other things that have really helped in terms of working from home is making sure that I established a morning routine, because I found that if I'm going to be home all day, I'm not going to have that change of environment. So I need to change things in my routine that will give me that shift of mind. So, getting ready like I was going to go to the office, getting dressed into something that was sort of work appropriate, and just creating a separation between my work and personal life. And another thing was really important, to gain clarity and I guess, to your point, like over communicate with team members to understand what's expected, who's doing what, and just building that really cohesive teamwork. And also, if you're starting to work in a remote office environment, understanding what your employer is going to provide in terms of support, if they're going to give you a laptop, if they're going to give you other tools, devices, whatnot, can be very different for each employer. So it's good to understand from the outset what's involved. And just really creating structures and boundaries. And if you're in a shared space, just managing to work that out effectively. So the other thing is, when you are having, and you will have a lot more video conferences or teleconferences, it's really important to be present and not be doing other things, because it's pretty obvious when you're typing away, people can see that. And for me, I found that the best calls that I've had are where I've been really engaged in the discussion and listening and contributing, and through that building good connections with others. Cool.
Thanks. And so the whole team at ECA is now working at home. What are the practices that you're doing at the moment? Now it's not just yourself or yourself and a few colleagues, it's everyone. How's that changed things in terms of
it has
staying
definitely
connected?
been a shift for everybody, I think. We have increased our communication. So we use Slack to message each other. Was probably more one-on-one before, but now we're utilizing that general group chat, signing in the morning, saying good morning, hello, and at the end of the day, signing off as well. So it's just, you know, trying to maintain a little bit like what we were in the office. The other thing that we're doing is we've increased our weekly meetings to 2 times a week, and we've introduced that as a video conference, so we still get to see each other and connect that way, which is really important. And you know, next week, for instance, we're having an Easter morning tea, so everyone will bring an egg and a cup of tea, so it'll be a bit of fun. It's really important to keep doing those things and celebrate birthdays and things like that. And yeah, we've also sort of split into smaller, more focused groups. Like we've got a COVID-19 team who catch up every day just to keep on top of what's happening. So yeah.
Cool. And look, just as a follow-up to one of your early comments, you mentioned that when you were working at home yourself, that you'd over-communicate, right? One of the experiences I've had, and that was what I was like, and when I worked in my previous employer, I was one of the few that did work at home a lot, and I'd be as present as I can, knowing that I wasn't physically present, right? Now, over this sort of first week, 10 days, I've noticed that everyone's trying to do this. I'm going to be as present as I can. And we're finding that we're all on calls and chat and etc. It seems 8 hours a day at the moment. So that idea of moving some of that communications off to the platform, Slack, etc., I think is a good approach. So we're not, so we actually have some time in our day to actually still get things done, basically.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Now, Sheila, I'm going to move across to yourself. Now we actually had a lot of the questions that came from the audience. I just want to quick remind everyone there is a Q&A panel. If you have any questions, please put it in there. We'll try to get to it. There is one in there already, which I believe Sheila's going to be addressing anyway. But a lot of the questions we got before the event actually related to your areas and around some of the mental health and well-being for remote workers. So what should we be focused on when it comes to that mental health? The well-being for remote workers?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's a really good question. I would say the very first thing, or the thing to be really mindful of, is the social impact is very real. Humans are social animals, we're social beings, and when we're put in our homes and asked to socially isolate, that has real implications for both us as individuals in terms of our mental health, but also in terms of our relationships with others. So it's really important, I think, for us to be mindful about how can we sustain ourselves over the coming months. This is not going to be a sprint, it will be somewhat of a marathon. So it's important to be thinking about, I would suggest, from 2 perspectives. Firstly, the team perspective, and both you, Tim, and Angela have touched on that. And secondly, a personal perspective. So I will drill down further into both the team perspective and an individual one.
Sorry, off mute. From a team perspective, what should leaders do and what should their teams be focused on right now?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think firstly, leaders, it's important for them to be aware that we are all experiencing a range of emotions right now. So in any given day, we might be experiencing anxiety, frustration, denial, fear, which is very palpable at the moment, motivated. You know, on the other extreme, we may feel motivated, we may feel a sense of purpose, have a sense of optimism, but we're going to be moving through those emotions moment by moment and day by day. So the first thing I would want to say to leaders and people managing others is to normalize that. Do what you can to normalize the fact that we're all experiencing a range of emotions. And by that, I mean openly discussing it, asking each other, and so on. So that's my first point for leaders, Tim. The second I would say is, and again, you've both touched on it, is to ramp up the level of communication and connection. Not only will that support well-being, which will mitigate the social isolation factor, but it's also really important for engagement and productivity. My suggestion for leaders, in terms of a broad framework, so to speak, would be to be explicit about what they value and expect from the team. That's really going to support team members in having a sense of purpose, a sense of cohesion, and being able to set priorities. But paradoxically, I guess, on the other hand, they can't have all the answers. Leaders just don't have all the answers right now. So it's important to actually be inviting participation from the team and asking them, what do we need? What do we need right now? And how can we solve this together? I'd be encouraging leaders to actually ask how, what contributions, I don't have the answers. What contributions do you have? What ideas? How can we solve this together? What I'm talking about essentially is the concept of psychological safety, which we don't have time to cover in this webinar, but I will add resources to be sent out following this. But essentially, it has been shown through 20 years of research that creating a psychologically safe team is the #1 factor when it comes to team effectiveness. So to summarize all of that, I would say communicate more thoughtfully and more frequently.
Cool. And what about that personal perspective? Because I know, as you say, a lot of us are going through it at the moment. We have this roller coaster of emotions throughout the day. We freak out and then we feel empowered, and right, it's a roller coaster, as I said. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a huge topic. So I'm going to talk about 3 key areas to support people in thinking about how they can be proactive, because I'd say thinking about this proactively is really important. And in terms of 3 key areas, I would say the first is emotional regulation. So what can you do to support yourself to avoid negative thinking patterns and negative self-talk? Things like catastrophizing, black and white thinking, jumping to conclusions. I know that I have done all 3 of those in the last wee while. And so I'm going to suggest 3 simple strategies for some key takeaways from this webinar. Firstly, I would say reframing. So when you have a negative thought, attempt to reframe it into something more positive. So for instance, if you're running a virtual session and it doesn't go so well, you can finish that session and say, I just can't do this, black and white thinking, that I'm never going to be able to do this. Or you can turn that around into, I'm a human being, I'm learning, and what a great opportunity to practice. So that would be my first point. Secondly, I would say, think about what you can influence. So there's a lot right now that we can't control. I would write that down, get really clear on what you can't control and put that to one side, and instead write a list of the things that you can influence and control. So if I give you an example, we can't control when the pandemic's going to finish. We can't control people panic buying. There's many things we can't control, but we can control our own mindset to a large extent, how often we exercise, how we're taking care of ourselves and each other, and whether we're stockpiling. So that would be my second strategy. My third would be to really carve out time for reflection and to stop and ground yourself. So what I'm talking about here essentially is mindfulness, and that's a very individual practice. For me, it's about having the routine that Angela talked about, where I get up in the morning and I get out and I walk in nature. But for others, it's yoga, it's breathing practices, it's exercising, spending time with friends, and so on. So that's my third simple strategy. In terms of the overarching, we've talked about emotional regulation. The second point would be social connection. So what are you doing to remain socially connected at this time? Again, a huge topic, but some very simple ideas in terms of virtually would be to set up Zoom chats with your family, play virtual games, and so on, and with people in your home. We're at home, we're exercising in my family, we have an exercise regime, we're holding each other to account to make sure that we exercise. By the same token, we're also making sure that we have our own me time, because we're spending a lot of time together right now. So that's the second. And the third practice in terms of taking proactive measures is what I call the Trinity of Health, which is essentially thinking about your exercise, your nutrition, and your sleeping patterns. And we all know they're important. And if I speak for myself, when I get busy, they can be the things that can fall by the wayside. What I'm really encouraging you right now is to put in some proactive measures to make sure you're staying on top of those. It will support your mental well-being and your immune system if you really keep a focus on those.
Cool. And we had a few questions from the audience before the webinar asking how employers can monitor that mental health. of their staff. Is there any sort of quick suggestions that you might have there?
Yeah, well, I would say firstly, ask them, be really proactive in asking. You've talked about check-in earlier. I think it was Angela. So have something in your team meeting sessions where you start the session, carve out a certain amount of time to simply ask the team, how are you tracking? Role model behaviour, so by which I mean really demonstrate empathy and compassion, and look for changes in others' behaviour. Refer to employee assistance programs if they're available. And my last point, I think, would be to educate yourself, to jump onto a website like Beyond Blue and get clear about mental health. Obviously, you're not going to become a mental health expert overnight, but to become aware of some of the challenges that some people might be facing so you can look out for them.
Oh, that's fantastic advice, Sheila. I know I, for one, am going to be going over this recording afterwards, and the recording is going to be available afterwards to everyone, and taking some serious notes from that and sort of changing the way I approach my day and my mental health, because I know I try to stay positive, but it can be hard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
So changing gears a bit, Matt, we're going to sort of talk around some of the technology enablers of remote working. We had a number of questions from the audience around this topic too. So Matt, what are the key technology considerations for enabling individuals and teams to work remotely with success? And one of the specific questions that we had that maybe you can address at the same time is, what are the technology platforms that are going to be needed or developed to make this remote working thing effective?
Yeah, sure, Tim. At the outset, I think whilst there's a range of technologies available, human factors are first and foremost one of the driving successes or failures of remote working. So just to acknowledge both Sheila and Angela's input there. But from a technology platform, obviously connectivity becomes key. That is making sure that you either have fixed internet, NBN, ADSL cable, or even 4G, which is quite effective. Now that does present some challenges as well in some areas, we acknowledge that. Obviously device perspective from a PC, laptop, that's important. To have a platform for messaging and collaboration, to make sure that you have a voice platform, either a soft phone or even using your mobile. Options like a headset, a monitor, keyboard, mouse, printer, those sorts of things become important for remote working. So the experience and the productivity of people working remotely is similar to that in the office. If I can just jump back to the collaboration and conferencing, Teams, Hangouts, Google, WebEx, there's heaps of them there, and we'll probably use all three, about four or five of those platforms, depending on who we're talking to. Some interesting stats is that the Zoom usage is up 1,000%, Teams is up 700%, and WebEx is up about 500%. So it's been a dramatic shift in the technology and the adoption of that. So that does lead to networks under pressure. So all of our communication networks are under pressure. Small changes like I'm now in standard definition, not high definition. There's a 7% overhead moving from standard definition to high definition. So for your practice there's more bandwidth to use. So simple things like that. Working out when you can collaborate. I had a video call last night with Israel at 7 p.m. Sydney time. It was hopeless because the network was flooded with Netflix and everything else that was going on. So picking your time. And I think the other piece is just around for organisations to embrace, and we've talked about leadership before, but just to step up and have some tolerance and be kind about how we're adopting this, because it is a new environment for a lot of people.
So what are the implementation challenges that people are going to be having in putting in remote working strategies, I guess, particularly at the moment when we are all remote working?
Yeah, so I think leadership, in organisational leadership is key. All organisations or team members need to be willing and able to work remotely. There's got to be trust, flexibility, and often assistance with that transition. For a lot of people, it is new. I've talked about that. Logistics is a really key part. We've probably assisted about 2,000 individuals move from their home office to a remote office over the last couple of weeks. And that's been a logistics challenge, not a technology challenge, purely a logistics one, around how do we arrange 2,000 deliveries to home, contactless deliveries, how do we get that done? Then shifting to remote support, the IT people that come around within the office are there all the time, but there is a massive shift in terms of remote support and how that's delivered. I'll reference my dear parents here. It's trying to get their iPhone working while you're on the phone to them. It's a real challenge. You have to have patience and tolerance to be able to get that, because it is a very different experience. Security breaches, they're up 300%. So it generates new security challenges by working remotely. And I've talked about the connectivity piece as well. So.
Cool. And is there anyone that you can point to that you see that they're a bit of a leader in this space, and sort of maybe some of the things they're doing or doing differently?
Look, everyone's approaching it slightly differently. If I look at one of our clients is one of the big 4 consulting firms. They've done it really well. New South Wales Health have gone down a couple of options as well around rental laptops, for example, because of the availability of stock isn't there. They've had to pivot. A number of local councils have done the same around rentals. Universities are doing the same. But interestingly, small business are finding new and innovative ways to work. So I think there's some good examples in both small, medium and large business. Just on the small businesses, because I know that in this audience there's a fair few small to medium businesses. But whilst their core productivity may be somewhat limited, they can be online fairly effectively and fairly cheaply to maintain that collaboration.
So I'm actually going to sort of jump forward, because we did have a few questions from the audience around this idea of it's not just how I work with my colleagues, but how I work with my peers and other small businesses, councils working with other councils or working with their suppliers. It's collaboration beyond the walls of your business. Do you have any sort of recommendations or best practices or tips around how they can do that well?
Look, I think if I look at local government, for example, I would engage locally with your local businesses and see what services or software they can provide or hardware that they can provide. If they don't have that, they can buy it online from us or somebody else. It doesn't really matter, but get them to install it. So local government do have an opportunity where they can create, again, along social isolation guidelines, environments where their Wi-Fi or their facilities, be it a gym or a hall, may be able to be used as a collaboration space for individuals who maybe don't have that environment at home. They could go into the local town hall and sit at a safe distance and be able to operate that. They take in their laptop, those sorts of things. So there's some of the examples, I think, specifically for local government, and they traditionally operate in the local area organisation of councils, the ROCs, do collaborate a lot. So I think they are able to take the lead in some of these as well.
Cool, thanks, Matt. Now, look, I'm going to we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in the session. There are a whole bunch of questions that we haven't got to. Now, what we will be doing is sending out a summary of the answers to those questions. I know we have one particular message on here around mentioning Beyond Blue and Head Start support documentation for business advisors, and this can be utilised by business owners. This is something I was not aware of. I assume that we'll be able to send that link out to those documents too, because I think that is a really useful tool for us to all have access to in this time.
That's actually on my list, Tim.
Oh, it is on your list. Cool. Thanks,
yeah,
Sheila.
so that's
Cheers.
good. Yeah.
Awesome. And thanks, Alexi, for bringing it up. In the question, so I'm now going to go just to Angela, Sheila, and Matt. I guess for a summary, like, what's the thing you should do when you get off this call? What do you do differently? Like, what's the main thing you should focus on? Angela, maybe if I can start with you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Tim. Well, yes, I think keeping the communication channels open, talking to your team, to your family, to everybody about how you're feeling, how you're processing things is really important. And and just also being okay with things like, you might be having a video call and your colleagues' children might pop into the screen for a little bit, that sort of thing, just being, empathizing with that. In terms of discipline and, staying focused, it's really good to create a structure and timetable for your day. Like to find your coping strategies. Like, I like to go out for a walk, as Sheila mentioned, really important to spend time out in nature. And I think like to make technology work for you. So there's generally like an app or a website or an article or something like that that'll help you to, you know, I guess just do your job better and also just find that, I guess, mental break or release. So for instance, I had a virtual lunch with a friend last week, and I'm going to have a virtual dance session with a friend at some point as well. So just, you know, trying to still have fun even given the circumstances.
Cool. And sort of my 5 cents there is checklists. We did have some questions around how I stay productive, or how I, you know, people saying I'm actually not that organized to start with. How do I get organized when I'm not in the office anymore? And for me, it's checklists. That's something I find really effective. And I'm not an organized person, and it makes me organized. And I get joy from ticking things off. It's really sad.
Yeah, so one last thing there as well is also just be mindful of not overworking. And I think like it's easy to go back to your computer after you've walked away, and then it's suddenly way later than you thought. And you know, if you're in leadership positions, setting some, you know, best practice models, and if you did say don't email after hours, then you actually keep that yourself as well.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, Angela. Sheila, what about yourself?
Tim, I would say don't underestimate the power of human connection even through virtual platforms. But you and Angela both mentioned presence and being present. It is actually a topic that is really close to my heart. I've just finished a book on team presence and leadership presence. And I think being really mindful about how you show up and how your presence is impacting the people around you is incredibly important, and equally, if not more important, virtually. Never before have we had the opportunity for so many people to be working remotely synchronously, and so this is such a great opportunity to experiment. So I encourage you, get out and experiment and embrace the opportunity.
Cool, thanks, Sheila. And Matt, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think just be resilient with your own remote working capability. I mean, we all have multiple devices, if it's a PC, a laptop, a phone. Just be available on all channels when you need to be, because technology does fail, and to be able to then have a backup plan to be able to continue to work, so you don't get frustrated with your inability to work. You have a mobile phone. You can do enormous things on your mobile if you really push yourself. So just have those backup strategies in place, and it will take a bit of pressure off those core systems that you use.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. Well, thank you everyone for taking part. I'm now going to hand it back to Therese to close it off, but thank you again.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, panelists, for providing such really good insights. I'd also like to thank Best Case Scenario and Luli Adimo and her team, who actually helped in securing some of our speakers and also supported us in delivering the marketing and the logistical side of the webinar. But one last thing, if you've got an idea that you would like to talk to us about in us delivering a webinar of particular topics that would support your business or support your organisation, and you would like to explore that further, I'd be very happy to have further discussions. Just email me, and I'll pursue it from there. But thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and take care. Thank you.